Hello, welcome back to Microsoft Windows Partner Training. This is Module 4, Windows as a Service. My name is Dave Field, and I'm with Microsoft Partner Services. We're going to talk about Windows as a Service, and it's important to get a quick overview of the product as we explore it. So we're going to talk today about the kind of an overview of it. We're going to talk about a servicing approach, and we're going to go into the different servicing branches that you might see as you start maintaining the Windows images. And we'll explore these branches in more depth later, but just broadly speaking, we have our Windows Insider branch, which is the group of people who have volunteered to kind of inflict the new version of Windows on themselves before it goes out to the real world. And these people are, essentially beta testers and, PC enthusiasts and people inside Microsoft. We really value their feedback, and it builds the product even better. The current branch is what goes out to consumers when we release a new version of Windows. So with this, we're looking at hundreds of millions of users around the world getting the latest features for Windows 10. And then we have the current branch for business, which is the branch that's been out for some time as current branch and has been basically perfected, and then we provide it to business users. And then finally we have the long-term servicing branch, which is a branch that's designed for servicing as part of an imaging process. And this would be used for systems that don't connect to the internet or that need to have an absolutely stable fixed configuration throughout the life cycle of the OS. So after that, we're going to talk about how to manage corporate updates, some best practices for this, and some ways to get your customers thinking about this as they start implementing Windows 10. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to move from one branch to another and what that's going to take. So it's important before we launch into a deep discussion of Windows as a Service to understand really what is involved with this process. We all know Windows Update has the capability to provide a number of things to us. These can include security patches, hot fixes, driver updates, antivirus updates, and feature upgrades. What we want you to focus on for Windows as a Service is just the feature upgrades. Because that's what we're really talking about when we talk about a servicing branch. This is a branch of Windows that is going to update features for you. When you're on a servicing branch, you're still going to get everything that normally flows through Windows Update, but we really need to just focus on the feature upgrades to understand what we're doing with Windows as a Service. And hopefully this will make a little more sense as we go forward, but keep this in mind as we have our discussion. So today, when we do our servicing, typically what we see is a monthly update cycle. You may be familiar with the term Patch Tuesday. And in between, we offer some critical security updates perhaps, some hot fixes to the OS, driver updates, and such. And as we go through this process, as you go month to month, you have IT pros who, take on these features or these updates and decide which ones to apply in their environment. So what we end up with is kind of a situation where the IT pro picks and chooses what they're going to receive for this month. We go on to next month. They choose some subset of those updates. We go to the third month and they choose another subset. And as time goes by, we move farther and farther from a known state that is supportable and where we understand everything that's going on. And that gap actually introduces some risk. Short term it increases risk because maybe we haven't taken on a security update that we should have. Long term, it's a greater risk because we've forgotten what might have been accepted or rejected 6 months ago. And so really the only chance we have then to get that system back to a known state would be either re-image it or apply a service pack. So we needed to kind of support a better way of servicing so that we can kind of keep things moving forward in a standard cadence. So We'll talk now about the Windows servicing approach and how this has changed for Windows 10. So for consumer devices, they're still going to receive all of their updates through Windows Update. So life for them really isn't going to appear to have much change. They're going to keep getting the hotfixes, the security patches, driver updates, and every once in a while, a current branch. And what we mean by current branch is an actual upgrade to the operating system to add new features. And so their experience when they go through this process will be more or less like getting a product update through Windows Update. And it'll be kind of business as usual for them. Now for the highly specialized systems, it's also going to be more or less business as usual. These are going to be systems that have critical roles, public safety roles, maybe environments where configuration change is both not required and in some cases detrimental to the performance of the system. And this will be a fairly small subset of corporate systems, but they will receive their updates via new images. So that's more or less the way we've done things before, so business as usual. What's really new and what we need to focus on as we go through this session is the updates for the current branch for business. And really what this is it is a deferred current branch. In other words, the current branch gets released on day 1, perhaps on day 120, we release current branch for business. And in the 119 days in between, we support the product, we deal with any bugs that are found, we apply hot fixes, and we put all of that quality control and quality improvement into the current branch for business. So an IT pro who's familiar with the service pack methodology might consider this to be, applying a service pack 3 months after the release. So a little bit about all of the phases the operating system goes through as we release it to the market. Our engineering team, they might build hundreds of builds of Windows in a day. Different teams are focused on providing certain features to the product, and they'll do a build of the product in order to test that feature. Many of these builds will never see the light of day. In fact, they might only be seen by one engineer. And this is a process that iterates hundreds of times, in a given day or in a given week. As we get closer to release, we do a broad internal release where Microsoft employees who have volunteered to be product testers get an internal build of Windows that is, in essence, a preview or a possibility of something we might release into public view. After this process, and when we reach a certain quality standard for that internal release, we'll go ahead and move this release out to our Windows Insider program, which is basically the first public access to this product. And we'll send it first to the fast-ring testers. These are people who know that they're at some risk, by taking things very early. They don't mind being on that leading edge, and so they kind of take it that way. At this level, it's quite possible that we might even orphan one of these branches that's released. It's possible to release something to the public and decide that no, we needed to fix some of those features, and we'll go back and create a new Insider fast ring branch update and send it to these testers for final testing. And after that process is completed, then we'll roll it over to the Windows Insider slow ring. So the Windows Insider slow ring testers, these are maybe a bit more conservative than the fast ring testers, but these are going to be your individuals who are focusing on really kind of understanding what's going to be in the next release of Windows. So this might be IT pros and developers as part of their job, not just because they're interested. And it would be maybe those PC enthusiasts who just want a little more stability in their environment. And so after we've gone through this process and we've gotten the Windows Insider slow ring to the phase where we decide we can release to the general public, then we go ahead and cut our current branch. And so this is a public release. It is announced through the normal release channels, and it's available to all consumers and all business systems that have deferred themselves into the current branch for business. By default, a system will put itself in current branch, so it takes an action by the user or by an IT administrator to set that system into the current branch for business. And we'll discuss that a little bit in our demo later on. So after some time in market, after a minimum of 4 months, we'll have had a chance to roll out current branch to hundreds of millions of systems around the world. And we'll see various configurations, all sorts of configurations possibly that we haven't tested in the Insider program. And so we're able to work through supporting all these scenarios and getting all these users upgraded and get any fixes to the OS that are necessary to support this baked in. And when we get to that point, then we go ahead and we cut the current branch for business. So a business user is using an operating system that has gone through 5 phases of testing before it gets to them. It gives them high assurance that it's going to be a stable product. It satisfies the needs of IT administrators who intentionally want to defer upgrades until they see that the bugs have been shaken out of it. So it should provide assurance that the customer is going to be in a good position to take this update. So to put this in a kind of a timeline and align it with the Windows code base, we need to understand that when we do one of these branches, it is basically a fixed version that goes through time, and the only thing that gets changed after it gets to a certain stage is fixes and updates. So let's have a look at how this might look. Here's a system or a branch that's gone through the build process, internal verification, and preview. As it goes into preview, we release it to Insider users who are running Windows Home or Windows Pro, and they start testing. When we get to the GA phase, we go ahead and cut a current branch release. This goes to Home, Pro, and Enterprise, and it basically is the consumer release of Windows 10. Now we put this in market for a certain amount of time, a minimum of 4 months, getting it deployed to hundreds of millions of systems, and then we go ahead and cut the current branch for business update. So this is really, kind of the approach we're taking to make sure that everything is stable by the time we get to the business world. Now, throughout this process, we continue to provide hot fixes, security updates, driver updates, and antivirus updates. Those all continue to flow through the Windows Update system, but the features are aligned with these branches. And then there's the long-term servicing branch. It does not necessarily flow on a one-to-one basis with the other branches. We might iterate through the current branch and current branch for business cycle 2 or 3 times before we roll those updates into a long-term servicing branch. So you should typically see long-term servicing branches happening every 2 to 4 years. It should be a long time in between. Okay, so let's take a look now at how these updates build over time. When we released the Release to Manufacturing or RTM build of Windows 10, we had to prime the pump and release current branch for business, and long-term servicing branch into market all at the same time. Going forward, however, it will build on a kind of a fixed process. When we release the next update to Windows 10, it comes out first as a current branch. After a minimum of 4 months in market, that will graduate to current branch for business. At the same time, we might release another current branch or we might not. That's not necessary typically for that to happen, but what's important to understand is the current branch basically just becomes current branch for business with problems fixed that might have been seen in the current branch. Now over time, we accumulate additional current branches for business and additional current branches. At some point, we will step back, take the intervening current branches for business, and roll that all into the next long-term servicing branch and deploy that to customers. All right, so let's take a look now at Windows Update for Business. This is a new capability with Windows 10 that allows administrators to control with group policy the rollout of Windows updates through their organization. This is intended to give additional time to test and validate some of the new features in a current branch or a current branch for business before they get rolled to enterprise systems. It also, since it works with group policy, it gives you the ability to set up organizational units to control the group affiliations and the systems that are part of each ring within a current branch for business rollout. It still uses Windows Update as its deployment infrastructure, so features like peer-to-peer delivery and some of those capabilities from Windows Update are still in play when we use this capability. It also works with tools like System Center to kind of extend those capabilities. And through this, as part of the group policy setting, you can elect current branch for business, and current branch for business additional deferral periods, all in one policy. So we'll a little bit later in the presentation, we'll take a look at how this process works, and I'll do a demonstration to show you how to configure this policy. Okay, so a little bit about the branches themselves. What's in Windows Insider Preview? This is a pre-release of Windows 10. The testers who have bravely volunteered to join this program, they know that life could get a little rocky at times, but they're eager to see what's coming and what's new in Windows. So they participate in this Insider community, they get us valuable feedback, and we perfect the operating system as a result of their efforts. So how do I think about this for the enterprise? This should be, for enterprise users, something that runs on a non-production PC. You don't want to risk your business on people using this version of the OS. That said, it's good for second PCs, for the people who decide to join the testing program. And we expect that these would be kind of the people who are able to support themselves. They know how to re-image a system. They know how to do a recovery. If they didn't, they'd founder soon and be out of the program. So we kind of expect things to follow this pattern. And so this might also be something you start having your developers and your IT pros with a second PC just start wrapping their heads around what the new feature updates are going to be and how to make sure that their applications and management processes are prepared for the new update. So current branch is going to be the public release of new features. This is going to be a milestone event in the operating system. It's going to be something that comes with some press coverage. It's not something that's just going to happen and nobody realized it. So you're going to have some warning that it's in the pipeline. But basically this is, we perfected it in Windows Insider and now it's ready to go public. So this goes out to all users who are using the default setting for Windows Update, and it goes in more or less a staged fashion. During the Insider Preview, we track telemetry on the systems that take on the update. We know which ones took it without issue. We know which ones had problems, and we set a cadence, kind of a staged migration of the user base. To avoid overwhelming our support services and also to make sure we work the bugs out of any problems we saw in Insider Preview. So this happens for some amount of time. It takes 2 to 3 months to get everybody up to current branch. For business, current branch would be basically any device that's coming off the shelf from the OEM that isn't using your corporate custom image. Consumer systems that are brand new should probably also have this on them. And then consumer systems that have gone through the staging process and have received the update. So you'll see some of this in Bring Your Own Device programs, and it'll be on your new machines that are coming into the enterprise. And so this could be for IT pros and developers what they put on their primary box. To give them early experience with the operating system and to help them be prepared to support applications and users and management going forward. You might also use this in the test lab to start early testing any developer updates you've done to line of business applications, and you might roll it out to your early adopters inside the company. If you have a person for each line of business that takes the early releases and helps you work the bugs out of it, this would be ideal for those people. So current branch for business is going to be a deferred current branch, and it's important to understand that. It's not new code. It's the current branch code with fixes. So it's been validated by hundreds of millions of users prior to getting to this phase, and it's not adding anything new. So if you think about it that way, it should provide some measure of confidence for the IT pro that this has been through extensive testing and is ready to go. But all that said, you still have the ability to defer up to an additional 8 months using management tools to help you kind of get this rolled out through the enterprise in a clean manner. So what does adoption look like for the corporation or for the enterprise? Typically, we're looking at about a 12-month window for each branch. Some amount of this time will be in testing, some amount of time will be in the public version, and the rest of the time will be current branch for business. So as we look at the Windows Insider preview, this can be second PCs for IT pros and developers. It can be lab systems. We kind of discussed that earlier, but these people kind of give you that early look and let you get up to date on what the new features are going to be. When current branch comes out, IT pros go ahead and update. Developers take it on, and it might also become, we talked about your early adopters might take it on as well. Now, when we do current branch for business, we can start to determine which groups of users within the organization are going to receive it at different times. You certainly don't want to, especially in larger organizations, you don't want to broadcast it and flood the help desk with a lot of calls about what's this thing happening on my computer? I don't know, I don't understand it. So you definitely want to stage that migration. So first you might send it out to complete the rollout to your early adopter community and start targeting your change agents, the people who are influential in the company and want to have, at least for the company or for the organization, the latest and greatest that's available. Get it to these people first. Then you can start rolling it out in stages. Maybe a limited corporate rollout. You've integrated the line of business apps. They've been through testing. The early adopters sign off on it. Now let's go ahead and pilot it to 1,000 users and control it in that way. If things look good, you go ahead and roll it out to Ring 2. You can even have Ring 3 and Ring 4, depending on the needs of the organization and their ability to take these on and manage the infrastructure through this process. And so what you'll see, and we really kind of want you to think about this in a wave analogy. You might be in current branch for business Ring 1 when the next current branch releases. And don't panic. You can continue rolling that out to Ring 1 and you can start rolling it out to Ring 2. Meanwhile, the next current branch is becoming current branch for business, and you can kind of work it through the organization in waves. And this is probably the best approach to manage this as well, to understand that there will be no time when you aren't upgrading part of your population in the organization. And if you kind of rethink the update processes and the approach to doing these deliveries, it's a good idea to do that now, and just kind of be prepared to take these as they come. Because the worst thing that could happen would be to stop and get into a position where you're faced with a wipe and load to get back on the train. So current branch for business, basically it's got it's met a quality criteria for elevation from current branch. It's got quality improvements and fixes, but you'll notice we don't say updates or new features. And we have a defined promotion ring that you can use Windows Update for Business or your enterprise management tools like System Center to promote this through your organization. So it gives us these capabilities. So to get to this, basically what we have to do is we have to configure a system on current branch to defer upgrades. And this is actually done in the UI, or it can be done with a group policy. And we'll demo that in a moment. So we release the current branch upgrade. The systems basically enter that deferment phase until we promote that current branch to a current branch for business. And then the timer starts on those systems. If you take no action and don't control it with some utility, your current branch for business systems will start to upgrade when we release the current branch for business update. So if you don't want that to be the experience, you definitely need to have a management capability in place to further defer those updates. Okay, we've talked about current branch and current branch for business. We've introduced Windows Update and Windows Update for Business and how these things work together. And we've discussed the group policy aspect of Windows Update for Business. So let's take a look at what this looks like in the system. If I navigate to Settings and then to Update and Security, we see the advanced options. By clicking on that, I see the Defer Upgrades checkbox. Checking this box moves my system from current branch to current branch for business. And that's literally all it takes to move a system to that status. Now, in that status, it would be controlled by whether an update was flagged mandatory in the Windows Update process. When an update completes its at least 4-month deferral window, it gets flagged mandatory, and then current branch for business systems start deploying it. Now, we need a little more granular control for enterprises. We also need the ability to configure this on multiple systems. It doesn't make sense to do this, at the desk side. So let's take a look at group policy for this same process. If I go to local computer policy on a local system, I can see these settings. I can also do this at the domain or OU level by managing group policy in Active Directory. So we expand administrative templates and look at Windows Components, and then scroll down to Windows Update. As we look at the Windows Update options, we see Defer Upgrades and Updates. If I open this policy, this is where this gets managed. By clicking Enabled, I set this system, or the systems controlled by this group policy, to that Defer Upgrade status. This is the base current branch for business enablement policy. I can see some additional options here, however. So Defer Upgrades for the following duration is setting that Windows Update for Business capability. By default, it starts at 0 months. We can create additional deferrals. So I can run this all the way up to as many as 8 months. And by setting this option, I can control for different organizational units within an enterprise what status they might have with regard to Windows Update for Business. So to put this in practical terms, I might have a group of systems where this policy isn't enabled at all. Those would be the current branch systems. So for instance, IT pros and developers might have that status. Then I can have another organizational unit where I apply the enabled without any deferral set. That would create a current branch for business group who would use that minimum 4-month current branch for business deferral. That might be our QA testers or our early adopters. And then I can create our Ring 1, 2, and 3 systems by creating policies to defer upgrades for, say, 2, 4, 6, or 8 months. And that would allow you to create these kind of segmentation of the user population and control this process. Also, as part of this policy, we have the Defer Updates setting as well, which will allow us to defer up to 4 weeks the, say, Patch Tuesday type updates. I could set a regular deferral where maybe we don't take these on week 0, we take them maybe a week in. Or I could use this if maybe I want to have some additional time for testing. And then finally, I have the checkbox for pause upgrades and updates. This gives you the ability to suspend all update activity. This could be used if you become aware of a problem with a patch that's in Windows Update, or if you're at a maintenance window in the organization where you can't have any updates happening. Perhaps as a year-end close, you need to defer updates for all systems. You could check this box, and it would take effect until the next time an update or an upgrade was released for Windows. Okay, so that was Current Branch, Insider Preview, and Current Branch for Business. We separate that from Long-Term Servicing Branch for a reason. Long-Term Servicing Branch, while we give it a name called Branch, it's not really part of that servicing life cycle. It's a accumulation of current branch updates that are fixed and cut as a specific deployment. It doesn't use the same bits. It only applies to Enterprise Edition, and it's actually acquired through the process that you would acquire volume license media from. So in terms of an IT organization's approach to deploying long-term servicing branch, or LTSB, they would typically think of this the same as they did the way we did Windows in the past. They could think of it as an OS upgrade. So it's not necessarily going to be, how best to put this, it's not going to be necessarily all of the current branch updates released previously rolled into one. It's possible also to release the next current branch in concert with a long-term servicing branch. You could see a new LTSB with that includes some of the current branch updates for that phase. So IT organizations will probably look at that, and you might even defer deployment of that LTSB until they've seen Current Branch for Business in order to take on any fixes that were released in that current branch phase. But the purpose of doing a long-term servicing branch is to provide the capability for organizations to set a group of machines apart from the servicing way of doing things, and have those machines be kind of that controlled configuration, fixed configuration, for stability and for other purposes. And we'll talk as we go forward about some of the systems that might apply to this category. A couple other caveats with long-term servicing branch is there are components of Windows that you won't find inside. You're not going to get the absolute latest features because Current Branch is going to continue to update throughout time, and long-term servicing branch will be fixed. We're not going to have Microsoft Edge, the new browser, on this platform because the Microsoft Edge platform is designed as a universal application which requires continuous updates for functionality and security and so forth. And the servicing model for that would be the same as the branch process. So we have to separate that. So we go to IE 11, Internet Explorer 11, with the long-term servicing branch. Same story for Universal Office applications and the Universal applications coming from Microsoft. You can acquire sideload applications for Universal apps that you can install at imaging time or afterward. So there still are some capabilities there, but the Microsoft applications, they need that Windows Store or Windows Update process to get their fixes on board. It does support 32-bit Office, so you can still deploy Microsoft Office on these systems. It does get security updates throughout the life of the branch, so even if it's off of the feature wagon, you still get security fixes, hot fixes, device driver updates, and antivirus updates. It's supported by Configuration Manager 2012, and there will be we'll talk a little bit more in the Configuration Manager module to come later, but at some point in the life of Current Branch for Business and Current Branch, we will need an upgrade to Configuration Manager to continue supporting updates with that platform. But long-term servicing branch allows you to go farther into the future with Configuration Manager 2012. And some of the systems that we might target with this, we have some examples here: air traffic control, hospital emergency rooms, Internet of Things, and ATMs, automatic teller machines. You could also consider this for point-of-sale systems. You could consider it for hand scanners for inventory management in a warehouse. Systems that typically don't need the latest and greatest features, but need that rock-hard stability and a tight configuration management. So IT, for systems along these lines, a new system won't come with LTSB on it unless you've provided a custom LTSB image to your OEM. So typically, new systems will come with Windows 10 Current Branch on board. So the approach to getting long-term servicing branch on these systems would be to do a wipe and load reinstallation of the operating system. For existing systems, long-term servicing branch will support an in-place upgrade from the previous long-term servicing branch. It's also possible to skip one long-term servicing branch update and install the next. We will support that kind of N-2 deployment. Additional skips would require reimage. And updates will be handled with Windows Server update services or from a media update. So it still keeps things, you still have that ability to patch and get security updates on board, but it won't be, on the upgrade bandwagon with the rest of the systems. And it will basically require kind of the traditional approach to upgrades. You'll want to do application compatibility testing, test those mission critical apps, make sure that they're solid for these systems, and you'll want to test your device drivers as part of the acceptance process. So life for IT pros on the long-term servicing branch doesn't change a whole lot. So now let's take a look at how servicing works in the enterprise and how things are going to be changing with some of the future updates for Windows 10. At RTM, the only option we had was to upgrade from a down-level OS, and that was the OS swap or the upgrade in place model. This was a 3-some gigabyte image, goes through the complete upgrade in place model, and takes a certain amount of time, usually 1 to 2 hours. For the November 2015 update to Windows 10, this again for down-level OSs will be an OS swap. For Windows 10 upgrade, it'll also be an upgrade in place for an OS swap from RTM to the November update. Future updates, however, are going to change with regard to Windows 10 servicing. There'll still be an OS swap for down-level OSs, but for the November update systems, it will be a service pack style experience called upgrade via servicing. If systems are still on RTM at that time, they'll still do OS swap into it, but then going forward, they'll use this update process as well. Some advantages of upgrade via servicing are that it takes less space, it's a quicker update, and less disruption to the experience of the users as they take on the next build of Windows. So a little bit about application compatibility and how this applies to Windows branches, because traditionally when we talk about upgrading Windows, there's an application compatibility process that has to go hand in hand with that. And if we're going to be updating Windows every 3 or 4 months, that kind of worries IT administrators who are accustomed to this process taking possibly a number of months to years. So how do we manage this? As we monitored the Windows Insider program, the people who were on this and who took the first versions of Windows 10, they reported application compatibility rates over 95% for applications running on the down-level operating systems. So we have high confidence that most updates are not going to cause significant issues in business. That said, they still will want to have some sort of testing approach, and we'll talk about that as we move forward through this section. So they'll want to be selective about which systems take it first. They'll want to prioritize the systems they know won't have issues and maybe start working on app compat for those systems running apps that do have issues. And they'll want to use a staged approach for the rollout. So that's kind of the approach IT pros will use for this. And since we support the operating system and support the upgrade in place model and are supporting this whole servicing methodology, the process of application compatibility would be supported. We can advise you on ways to fix these applications and work with your ISVs to get them up to date. So Microsoft is here to support through this process. So to put it into numbers, our internal builds go to hundreds of users within the operating system group. As they move into the internal validation, they go to tens of thousands of Microsoft people and some of our vendors and get extensive testing there. When we get into Insider Preview, fast and slow, the current branch goes out to hundreds of millions of computers. Currently, as we speak, we've gone over 100 million users on Windows 10 globally. And that is a lot of people that get current branch and have a chance to work the bugs out of it with us. And then we move into the current branch for business, where basically everybody else. And then corporate administrators, with their internal controls, can further segment this to carry it into sometime in the future as they adopt it in their enterprise. So how do we work this into existing policies or existing processes within the enterprise? Most enterprises have a envisioning/developing phase for new programs or new applications. They might move into a QA test lab environment. Then they might send it to user acceptance testing to a small group of users and then a pilot group. We're anticipating that you'll want to use roughly the same process with the servicing branches for Windows. Developers and IT pros can be on preview branches, start getting applications tested with the new features, make sure everything works. And then when you get to kind of that test lab phase of your deployment, you roll in current branch and get your testers using it, go through their test profiles, their test scripts, make sure everything works. And then you send it out to the user acceptance group when you get to the current branch for business. Get them on board, get it tested, and then you can start your phased rollout into production. So this is how we anticipate that process moving going forward. That is the approach to what the branches are and how to work them into an enterprise adoption scheme. So we're going to leave you with one last thought, which is, if I'm on one branch, how do I get to another? And at risk of sounding humorous, I want to kind of leave you with this. You can swing forward to another branch, but you can't swing back. It's always easier to move forward than it is to move back. So if you want to get to newer bits, that's easy enough to do through an in-place upgrade. So as we can see from this table, if you're currently on preview, you can upgrade to the new preview as an in-place upgrade. If you're currently on current branch, you can also upgrade to preview and the new current branch. And follow this down to LTSB. You can even upgrade into preview from there. Now, if I want to go backward, if I'm on preview and I want to go back to current branch, I can't remove the features from preview and step down. And I can't really jump off the train there either, because I've got no assurance that current branch is going to be preview, the preview bits I have today in 3 months. So if I want to get to supported current branch, I have to wipe and load the system. And that approach follows for any basically downgrade to reduced features. So current branch for business can't downgrade to LTSB without a wipe and load. So if you think about it on that approach, this chart makes a lot of sense. And you can spend some time looking at this. Feel free to reverse the video and just stare at these pretty colors for a while. But this is the supported approach to going from branch to branch, and should give a good experience as we go through. Okay, this completes our discussion of Windows as a Service. Thank you for joining us for this module, and we'll see you in Module 5. Have a great day.